All right, so it is time for using the starter. So um, in this process, the starter has been pulled out of the refrigerator. It's been fed at least 2 times. It's best to do 3, but I've lately been doing 2. The starter has had time to feed. So you wake up in the morning, you feed it, and I've discovered lately that right around 4 to 5 hours of being fed kind of gets you some results. You can kind of see where the masking tape line is, and it's kind of gone up this much. They say that a good place, you want this at its kind of its peak, to where there's still a little bit of a dome, but it's at the sides. There's a kind of like it's kind of bowed up on top, but that's a little bit subjective. So a good practice is to go ahead and test your starter to make sure it's in a state to be used. And a good way to do that is to grab yourself a little bit of spoonful. Let's grab a little bit more than that, and you drop it in some water. If it floats, which it is currently doing, it is ready to be used. There's enough air in there and there's enough action going on that you will get the action that you're looking for with that starter. Now it comes down to, what are you going to put it in? So making bread with starter comes down to different percentages with the items that you're using. The bread that we make using starter has a handful of ingredients. Mostly it's flour, water, salt. If you count the starter, it's flour, starter, salt, water. But technically starter is just flour and water, so it still kind of comes down to three ingredients. But to make a loaf of bread, you can get it really breaks down pretty easily with percentages. So you can kind of go with any amount of flour in any weight measurements. So let me go back to the weights. So let's say you're starting with I don't know, 100 grams of flour. That is your starting point. So the amount of water that you add to that flour, the amount of starter that you add to that flour, and the amount of salt that you add to that flour is 100% related to the amount of starter or amount of flour you have in the beginning. So in this scenario, you have a certain amount of starting point. So, and that can be in any kind of combination. So you can use wheat flour, 100% wheat flour, which I don't recommend. It tends to be a little bit drier, but that's your own choice. I normally do combinations of AP flour, bread flour, wheat flour, or spelt flour. All kind of goes in hand. And you kind of just want a total amount. So in this scenario, today's lesson, I'm doing 700 grams of flour in a combination of 300 grams AP, 300 grams bread flour, and then 100 grams of wheat flour for 700. In this scenario, I am also going to then do a certain amount of water, and we'll get into that a little bit more. A certain amount of starter, so 20% starter, and then 2% salt. So it's going to be, you're going to take your first calculation and then do some math, and that's the weights that you're going to be using on your scale. So the starting point again is flour, but where you want to go with that at the beginning is how much water you want to use. Water is really important in this scenario because the amount of, and they refer to it as hydration, the amount of hydration you have in your bread, it kind of has a one-to-one relationship with the density of the bread. So if you have a lower percentage of water, you're going to have smaller air pockets, and it's going to kind of be almost like sandwich bread, like Wonder Bread, lower percentages. So if you are using a loaf pan, you'd want to use, I don't know, 70 to 75% hydration. But if you're doing like a big old artisan like bowl, kind of a big old loaf that you buy in a store, you want that higher percentage. You want 76 to even 80% hydration. And what that will do is that water is what expands when it gets hot, and it gives you those big old air pockets, that signature sourdough kind of air pockets within the bread. And that is all kind of contingent on the amount of hydration you have in your setup. So you kind of want to figure that out beforehand. If you are going to be using a Banneton, which we'll get into in another video, or if you're going to be using, say, just a regular bread pan, you're going to want to use different hydration levels. In this scenario, I'm making a bowl, or I'm kind of going in the middle. So we are going to say, let's say 76%. So if we say, what is 76% of 700? It comes down to, we need 532 grams of water. That is by weight. So you want to weigh out your flour. You want to then add water to it gradually until you get your desired hydration level, 76% for today's lesson. And then you want to combine those. And you can do that any number of ways. But that leads us into another important step, and they call it auto leasing. That's where you add the water to the flour a little bit early to let it kind of get incorporate a little bit better, and it helps starts building that gluten early. So you take your dry, add the water to it, and you mix it together. And then you let it sit for a bit. And that's kind of where things are right now. So there's nothing in here right now except for flour, 700 grams of flour, and then 532 grams of water. And that has been sitting there for 45 minutes. You can do auto lease for 30 minutes. You can do an hour. I've done 2 hours because I forgot about it one time. There's no real line in the sand there. You kind of do what you can. But now it's to the point where we're ready to start adding other ingredients. So what's the next ingredient? We're going to say salt. Again, 2% of 700 grams is 14 grams. So we're going to go ahead, get this to 0. Add the dough. Let's get this to a point where we can kind of see it. There. And then add 14 grams of salt. So you're just going to sprinkle this on. And the salt dramatically changes the texture of the dough. It'll just seem more firm the more you mess with it. So there's 11. And there's 12. Zero that out again, and now it's time for the starter. And the starter is going to be 20%. So we're going to add our 140 grams of starter straight to this, just right on top. 140. Actually, there's 141. It doesn't. You can kind of be close on this. You don't have to be exact. It's roundabouts. And then what I like to do is I like to get a rubber glove just because I don't want to deal with the goop. But you can kind of do this any kind of way. I personally like to just spread it around and then start pinching it. Learned this from someone we watch on YouTube a lot, Claire Saffitz. I think that's her name. Just pinches the starter in and starts mixing in some of that salt into the scenario. And then I eventually get to the point where you just start folding it over on itself. And this folding process is something that will happen for the next 2 to 3 hours. Every 30 minutes, I'm going to come down and I'm going to wet my hands, and I will show this later. Just folding on it over, and what this does is the stretching out kind of builds up the gluten, and it will eventually make it to where this is solid enough to handle and to shape into a loaf. And that'll be a different video, but for now, this is kind of where we're at. So this is all kind of combined real well. I can kind of let this be. I will then cover it. And then restart my timer. And I will come down and fold this every 30 minutes until it's time to shape it and do the next step with it. So I will show you the first fold, then after that you can kind of read between the lines. So see you in 30. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. Now it's time for the first fold. So you'll notice, well, maybe you will, it's kind of settled back down. You can almost even see a little bit of the difference here where the starter kind of hasn't mixed in that well. You can kind of see the individual the wheat flour kind of speckles in there, and that's kind of cool. So the move here is to wet your hand. Cold water is best. Then you can just come right over and you just want to fold the bread, or fold the dough. So see, it's kind of stretchy. Rotate, fold, rotate, fold, rotate, fold. But you want to be careful not to kind of stretch it here. You don't want to rip it. You're just building gluten. And there, you kind of see it's a little bit more structured. And in the next 30 minutes, you come back down and it'll be flat again. So that's kind of it. That's the folding process. And that'll probably be the end of this video. Next one will be shaping and putting the final shaped dough into a container of some sort. And I kind of forgot one last thing. So we are folding every 30 minutes, and we are doing that for 3 hours. Kind of, we discussed that. You don't have to be exact on that. It's not gonna be a big deal if you miss that 30-minute mark. I've done folds in hour increments. It's just not that big a deal. Now this is an exact. You have to do this at this minute. It's just it's okay to space things out on and kind of just do it when it's convenient. So that's all. Thanks.